just allow your eyes to close. And we'll begin by reminding ourselves of our intention. That is, I'm giving myself this time for practice. May it benefit me, and may those benefits flow to all of the beings that I come in contact with. May I come to know great freedom and peace of heart and mind. And then we start by exploring the first element, the element of earth. And I want you to imagine yourself sitting outside, sitting on the ground, maybe leaning your back against the comforting strength and solidity of a big rock. And this earth element represents everything that's solid and strong within us. So those will be things like the bones, the teeth, the muscles, the hair. So as you sit here, feel the weight of your body. Feel how solid it is. Feel the pressure of the body against the ground. Feeling into your body, feeling into the bones, and noticing the way they give structure to the body, enable us to be upright, to sit and to stand. Without the bones, we might be more like a jellyfish. Remembering that our bones and our teeth need minerals from the earth. Calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium. Without these minerals, our bones become weak and easily broken. We take in those minerals from the food that we eat, which originally comes from the earth. And what comes from the earth, providing strength and solidity in our bodies, ultimately returns to the earth again. I want to tell you a little story about this. I was reading about a woman who was a great gardener. She had a really good composting system for her garden. And in her day job, she ran a laboratory for the university. One day she found a dead fox in her garden. Beautiful creature, long, glossy fur. And for some reason it had died. And she thought to herself, my students at the university would be very interested to see the skeleton of this fox. So she took the fox to her compost heap and she arranged it in the compost heap so that the skeleton would be clear to see. And then she piled more earth and leaves on top of it. And she left it there thinking that in a few weeks, the flesh might have dissolved away from the bones and she'd be able to see the whole skeleton and take it in and show it to her students. So she left it there for 3 weeks and then she thought she would see how it's going. So she came back and very gently she cleared the compost away from the top until she got down to the level where she had left the fox, she cleared it all away. And what was there? Nothing. There was just an imprint of the fox in the ground and a few teeth. every other bit of that fox, the beautiful fur, the bones, the sinews and the muscles, had returned to the compost, returned to the earth. In 3 weeks, nothing left but just a few teeth. If we think about it, how long would it take our bodies to return to the earth? A few months? No longer. Of course, the bones tend to last longer than any other part of the body. And under the right conditions, the skeleton can last a long time, maybe even become fossilized and become part of the rock itself. But we have to acknowledge in the end that this strong, solid body is not me, it's not mine, not myself. It's built from the earth, from the elements of the earth. And in the end, it will return to the earth again. But just take a moment more, feeling that strength and solidity of the body. Knowing that it comes from the earth and it will return to the earth again. And then in your imagination, take a walk away from your rock and find yourself a place to sit by your favorite piece of water. Maybe by the ocean, by the river, a creek. And let's move on to contemplating the water element. Maybe you'd even like to imagine that you're floating in the water, feeling your body cradled and rocked and gently supported by the waves. The water element represents everything that's fluid within you. So feel the moisture in your eyes, the saliva moistening the mouth. You can connect through your imagination with the blood, carrying oxygen and nutrition to every cell in the body. You can imagine the lymph fluid carrying the immune cells to fight infection and heal wounds. You can imagine the cerebral fluid surrounding the brain, keeping the brain lubricated. The spinal fluid carrying messages up and down the spine. And then there's the synovial fluid in the joints that allows us to move so fluidly and gracefully, at least some of us. We're told that 70% of our bodies is made up of this water element. It's vital to our being. We can't live long without it. We see this water element in the world all around us. Rivers, streams, and creeks, ultimately all flowing into the ocean. We're aware of that water from the oceans being evaporated up into the clouds. We feel the humidity in the air on a hot summer's day. The clouds hanging over us, full and dark, before the rain comes down, cooling and refreshing all the life forms on earth. Where do all these fluids in the body come from? They come from that same water in the streams and in the rivers. Every couple of hours, we're taking in more water. We feel that water flowing through it, down our throats, flowing through us. And when our bodies have used what we need, we pee it out. We sweat it out. We breathe it out, returning this water element to the world. So this water element, 70% of our bodies, is not me. It's not mine. It's not myself. It's just borrowed from the universe. And it returns to the universe when we're finished with it. Now, if you waded into the water, come out of the water again and rest in the warmth of the sun as we contemplate the fire element. The fire element represents the warmth and the energy in our bodies. So become aware of that warmth where one part of your body rests against another part. It might be the hands resting in the lap. It might be the arms resting against the sides of the body. Allow yourself to stretch a little. If you're feeling stiff, move the fingers, wiggle the toes. Pull the chin back in towards the throat and stretch the back of the neck. Just feeling those small movements in the body. That warmth and energy is life itself. We know that when a body is cold and stiff and unmoving, that life has passed. Where does that warmth and energy come from? The ancient yogis talked about Agni, the fire of digestion. They envisaged a small fire deep down within our bellies, where our food was consumed and turned into energy that we could then use to do all kinds of things in the world. Ultimately, of course, our food comes from the sun. As the plants use the light and the warmth of the sun to grow. We take that stored energy from the sun, from our food, and we use it to fuel all of our activities. We use that stored sun energy, first of all, just to grow more food, to build shelters and dams for holding water and boats and bridges. We use it to solve problems, to create music, stories, images, and wonderful gadgets like smartphones and robots. Truly, we do amazing things with our fire energy. So amazing that we might be tempted to think, this wonderful thing that I've made, this really represents the best of me. This is how I appear in the world. I'm the artist, the inventor, the composer, the problem solver, the beloved parent nurturing the next generation. But while we happily rush to claim the rewards and the recognition for all of our work, we forget that this energy comes from outside us. This is the stored energy of the sun flowing through us, warming us, giving us the energy we need to do all these things. So we may need to remind ourselves sometimes, this fire element, this warmth and energy, it's not me, it's not mine, it's not myself. This is energy that I've borrowed from the universe, and hopefully I use it for good in the world. And then moving to the air element. And noticing as you sit where the air touches your skin, your face, your hands, any part of the body that's exposed to the air. Just noticing whether the air where it touches you is warm or cool, whether it's moving or still. We also notice the air as it enters and leaves the body. Cooler air flowing over the upper lip, through the nasal passages, down the throat, filling the lungs. Warmer air flowing in the opposite direction, moving out of the body. Becoming aware of this meeting of the body with the air element, happening both inside the body and outside the body. The air element surrounds us, and we can feel it on our skin. We feel it entering and leaving the body as we breathe. We experience it as the wind. We see it moving grasses and making waves on the surface of water. That same element is inside us, filling our lungs, dissolving into our bloodstream, entering every cell in our body, keeping us alive. Oxygen combines with molecules in the body, becoming part of every cell. And as we reflect in this way, we might remember that the air that we breathe has largely been made by the rainforests of the world. So as we breathe in the rainforest. The rainforest becomes part of our body. What is not us becomes us. And in turn, our living and breathing produces carbon dioxide that returns to the rainforest, being absorbed, turning into wood and branches, stems and leaves, fruit and flowers. So the rainforest, in part, is us. Made from us. Something that we think of as us becomes not us. And the air element in reality never was us. We can't hold on to it. It's just flowing through us. It's borrowed from the universe and returns to the universe after flowing through us. Taking a breath or two, just enjoying that air element for a moment. And then as you sit here, becoming aware of the space all around you. Feeling a sense of spaciousness within your body and all around. When we're born, pushed out of our mother's body, miraculously, a me-sized space opens up in the world to accommodate us. Space in the universe just for us. A space which fluctuates as our bodies grow, becoming larger as we become taller, fatter, maybe pregnant. Perhaps shrinking back a little after the baby's born, or as we become old. But my space is not just the space, it's not just the size of my body. No, we expect more. Just for a moment, stretch out your arms right out to the sides. Stretch right out to the fingertips. That's how much space we want around us. In all directions, we want at least an arm's length of space. If someone were to come and sit in your lap right now, you'd be pretty annoyed. That person would be invading your space. But in reality, we don't have any rights to this space. This space that I occupy now was occupied by someone else just a short time ago. Let me take you on a little walk through my neighborhood. We're going just around the corner to Parama Park, a beautiful, spacious park on the edge of Sydney Harbour. The name Parama reminds us of the Gadigal people the Aboriginal people, first people in this country, who used to like to come here and collect oysters and shellfish off the rocks. They left behind the name, Pirama, and their piles of oyster shells. I'm sure it must have been one of their favourite places because it has plentiful fresh water, little waterfalls down the cliffs. The sea is calm, it's good for swimming. The oysters are easy to find. When the English settlers came, the Gadigal were pushed out. Many of them died from the smallpox that the settlers brought with them. But the settlers discovered Pirama in their turn. And in one of the very earliest newspapers in the colony, it was described as a very pleasant place for a picnic. The council have carved that saying into a bench by the water so that we remember the first settlers. We can imagine those early settlers in their uncomfortable clothes, enjoying the sunshine, the fresh air and the space here. So different from the pollution and the crowding of Britain. And then through the 19th century, this area became very industrialised. And the space was filled with the sugar workers. There was a big sugar refinery here, turning sugar cane into brown sugar, white sugar, golden syrup and treacle. The sugar workers are gone now, but some of the big wooden beams from their factory still remain in the park, advertising 10-pound tins of treacle and 20-pound bags of sugar. When I came to live in Sydney in the 80s, this space was owned by the water police. They kept their boats here. It was all fenced off with a high fence, and the public was not allowed in. There were signs saying, "Keep out." The water police owned this space, and they weren't letting anyone else in. But sometime around about the year 2000, the water police were shunted off somewhere else, and the council turned this space into a beautiful waterside park. I was coming home in a taxi recently, and I'd been chatting with the taxi driver. He was a Syrian refugee, and he'd spent a number of years on Manus, but had finally managed to get out. He got himself to Sydney, and he managed to bring his wife and his 2 little girls here. And he had a job driving a taxi. He said the best thing about Australia was that you weren't being shot at all the time. There was some roadwork happening just as we got to the park, so we were held up for a bit. But he was very interested in the park and was asking me all kinds of questions about it. Were those barbecues? Were they free? Yes. See, the children's playground over there, is that free too? Yes, also free, open to anyone. As we moved off, he said that he was going to bring his family here on Sunday for a picnic. And it gave me quite a lot of pleasure to think that this space, which has been owned by so many different people over the last 2 centuries, would for a little while on the weekend be possessed by this man and his small family. Whatever space we think we own in this world, we can be sure that someone else was here before us, and someone else will be along as soon as we move on. And then we come to consciousness, our last element. Consciousness is the process by which we take all of the sensory input that we get, all of the sights and sounds and smells, the feelings of things that brush against the skin, and the feelings that arise from all of those sensory experiences of liking or disliking something. And we use our consciousness to try to make sense of it all and weave it all together into the story of our lives. Consciousness creates for us the story of who we are and why we are the way we are, and in what ways we're unique. We tend to think that consciousness is ourself, and that as a species, we have a very special form of consciousness, much superior to all other life forms. We're only just starting to discover that although some aspects of our consciousness are highly developed, other life forms can outdo us in some ways. We know, for instance, that animals are much better than us at predicting changes in the weather. We know that birds and turtles and some other animals have amazing navigational abilities that let them crisscross the globe, coming each time to exactly the spot they want to be without benefit of any navigational aids. And lately we've discovered that trees, who really we didn't think were conscious at all, can detect when the trees growing near them are struggling, perhaps starting to die from lack of food or water. And they can share nutrition with them through the vast fungal web that grows beneath the surface of the earth. Our consciousness may be special in many ways, but it's not always reliable. It relies on the input we get from sense data, what we see and hear and smell, or touch or taste. But that's limited by the particular body that we're in. And it changes as we age. At any point in our lives, we may have a strong, accurate sense of sight or hearing, or we may have poor sight, or be partially deaf, or completely deaf. So we might get accurate information from our senses, or we might not. Some senses might be missing. A young person may have very sharp senses, but lack the experience to know what that data means. An older person may have gaps in the data because their senses are failing, but's better able to fill in the gaps from past experience. So individual consciousness may be unique, but not very reliable. Consciousness works better when it's shared. Through sharing, we get more sources of data, and we can test our own understanding against other people's interpretations. We're only at the very beginning of understanding what we might learn from the consciousness of other species. Our particular interpretation of the world is constantly changing. Sensations and thoughts and feelings coming and going, and being shaped by our awareness and our experiences. So we tend to think of ourselves as separate from the rest of the world. But reflecting in this way, we can see that we're intimately connected with the rest of creation, invisibly connected with all living things, part of the great cycle of elements. As we borrow and return the elements of earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. Take a last few minutes to just sit and appreciate this miraculous world we're part of. Appreciating a sense of interconnectedness. Appreciating ourselves intimately connected with all of life. And then bring your awareness back to your body and gradually open the eyes and let yourself come back to the group. So that is the sixth element practice. And although it's a practice that is largely focused on getting us to dismantle some of our beliefs about the self. And so you think it could be a bit kind of discouraging, but in fact, I always find it a really uplifting practice. And I'd love to know what you think about it, whether you enjoyed it, whether you have questions about it. So let's just open that up to some discussion. We can turn our microphones back on, or you can put any question you like in the chat, and we'll see how we go.